Once upon a time there was a little, nice girl. She was sweet to everyone who only saw her. But she was the loveliest and dearest of all to her grandmother, who did not even know what to give her beloved granddaughter. Once she gave her a red velvet hat. And since this hat was very suitable for her, and she did not want to wear anything else, they began to call her Little Red Riding Hood. Once her mother asked to take a piece of cake and a bottle of wine to her grandmother. They say that she is both sick and weak, it will be good for her. She ordered my mother not to run away from the road, otherwise she would fall and break the bottle, and then grandmother would get nothing. And when she comes to her grandmother, so that she does not forget to say hello to her. Little Red Riding Hood obeyed, took the presents and set off. And my grandmother lived already behind the forest, half an hour walk from the village. And as soon as Little Red Riding Hood entered the forest, she met a wolf. The girl, however, did not know what kind of fierce beast it was, and was not in the least afraid of him. She greeted politely. The wolf also behaved very decently, so Little Red Riding Hood told the wolf that she was bringing gifts to her beloved grandmother. And while she was telling how to get to her grandmother's house, the wolf thought to himself how he could eat not only the old woman, but also a pretty girl. And then the wolf thought of showing Little Red Riding Hood a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. Little Red Riding Hood, as she looked at the many wonderful flowers, thought that it would be nice to bring grandmother a fresh bunch of flowers, because that would also please her. Yes, and ran away from the road to the side, and began to collect flowers. Slightly picking one flower, as the other beckons her, it is even better, and she will run after that. And so it went further and further into the depths of the forest. And the wolf ran straight to grandmother's house and knocked on the door. Grandma asked who was there. And the wolf replied in a thin voice that it was Little Red Riding Hood who brought the pie and wine. The old woman believed and ordered to press on the latch and enter. The wolf pressed the latch, the door flew open, and he ran to his grandmother's hut. He rushed to grandmother's bed and swallowed it at once. Then he put on his grandmother's dress and her cap on her head, went to bed and waited. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood ran and ran after flowers, and when she collected as many of them as she could carry, then she again remembered about her grandmother and went to her house. She was very surprised that the door was wide open, and when she entered the room, she called out to her grandmother. There was no answer. The granddaughter came up to the bed and saw grandmother was lying, and she had pulled her cap on her very nose, and it seemed so strange. Little Red Riding Hood asked with bewilderment why grandmother had such big ears. And the wolf answered in a grandmother's voice to hear better. Then Little Red Riding Hood asked why grandmother had such big eyes. To better see you, the wolf answered. And the arms are so big that it is easier to grip. And when Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf's mouth and only asked why grandmother had such a nasty big mouth, the wolf pounced on her, screaming, "So I could eat you!" And how he jumped out from under the blanket and swallowed the poor girl. Having had enough in this way, the wolf again went to bed, fell asleep, and began to snore as much as he could. At that time a hunter was passing by the grandmother's house, heard snoring and wondered if something had happened to the old woman that she snored so. He entered the house, went to the bed and saw that the wolf was sleeping there. And he has been hunting this villain for a long time. He wanted to kill him with a gun, but it occurred to him that the wolf, perhaps, swallowed his grandmother and that she could still be saved. That is why he did not shoot, but opened his wolf's mouth wide, and saw a red cap flashed there. A girl jumped out of her mouth and said that her grandmother was still there. The hunter opened his wolf's mouth even wider, and the old grandmother somehow managed to get out behind the Red Riding Hood. They were delighted, began to hug and thank the hunter. They decided to teach a cunning wolf a lesson. They brought up large stones as soon as possible, stuffed them into the wolf's mouth and belly, and carried him out into the yard. And when the wolf woke up, he saw the hunter, and was about to escape, but could not bear the weight of the stones, and fell to the ground. This delighted all three, while the wolf got up and barely dragged its heavy belly into the dark forest. They never saw him again. This is how they taught the cunning wolf a lesson, and Little Red Riding Hood decided that she would never again disobey Mother's orders.
Once upon a time there was an old miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left his sons a mill, a donkey, and a cat. The eldest got the mill, the middle got the donkey, and the youngest had to take the cat. The older brothers laughed at him, but the cat promised that he would make his younger brother rich if he gave him a pair of boots and a bag. The owner was surprised, but fulfilled the cat's request. The cat immediately pulled on his boots on his hind legs, poured oats into the sack, threw it over his shoulders, and went hunting. In the forest, he opened the bag, threw it on the ground, and hid himself in the thickets. He didn't have to wait long. A curious hare galloped to the sack and climbed into it to feast on oats. And the cat was just waiting for that. He jumped out of the thicket, tightened the sack, lifted it on his shoulders, and went to the royal castle. The king of that country was a great lover of good food. The cat bowed deeply to him, handed the hare, and said that it was a gift from his master, the Marquis de Carabas. The king was pleasantly surprised by this surprise. The cat bowed like a real nobleman and hit the road. The next day he went hunting with the sack again. This time he managed to catch 2 fat partridges. The king was delighted to see another pleasant gift. For several weeks in a row, the cat continued to wear partridges and hares to the king. But he did not say anything about this to his hungry and emaciated owner. Once the cat saw a princess in the palace. She was very beautiful. The cat realized that she would be a wonderful wife for his master. And so the king wanted to finally meet the Marquis. The cat replied that they could find him tomorrow for a walk where the mills were. And he himself ran at full speed to the mill. Seeing the owner, the cat said that tomorrow he will need to swim in the river, and then his life will change. The next morning, as soon as he got into the water, the cat grabbed his clothes and hid them in the bushes. At that moment the royal carriage appeared on the road. The cat jumped out onto the road and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Save me! Help! The Marquis de Carabas is drowning!" Hearing this, the king ordered to pull the Marquis out of the water. The miller's son got very frightened when 2 guards began to drag him out of the river, where he was basking in warm water. The king ordered to bring him his silk attire. The miller's son initially refused, but he liked the gold-embroidered clothes so much that he gladly put on the royal outfit. The king invited him to the carriage, where the beautiful princess was sitting. The miller's son was dumbfounded, but without further ado got into the carriage. A minute later, the carriage rolled on through the fields and meadows that belonged to the giant cannibal who lived in a huge castle. The cat wasted no time, and what was the spirit rushed ahead of the carriage towards the meadow, where the reapers were working in the sweat of their brow. He asked them to say that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas, otherwise the evil cannibal will eat them. Before the astonished reapers could reply, the king's carriage pulled up. And when the king asked whose meadows they were, they answered in a friendly chorus that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas. Meanwhile, the cat went straight to the man-eater's castle. With feline dexterity, he jumped over the stone wall and made his way into the castle. The cannibal was sitting at a large table laden with various dishes. Seeing the Puss in Boots, he was greatly surprised at such impudence. The cat began to tease the giant, and said that he could not turn into a lion. Before the cat had time to utter these words, the cannibal turned into a huge lion with a shaggy mane. The cat's soul went into his boots from fear, but he overcame it and said that the cannibal could never turn into a mouse. The terrible lion disappeared, and a small mouse appeared in its place. And that was all the cat needed. In the blink of an eye he caught up with the mouse, caught it and ate it. At this very time, the royal carriage drove into the castle courtyard. Opening the carriage doors, the cat bowed politely, and said that he was glad to see everyone in the castle of the Marquis de Carabas. It is difficult to say who was more numb from amazement at these words, the king or the miller's son, who already did not understand anything at all. The cat took the guests to the table. At the end of the dinner, the king, having eaten to the fullest, said that the Marquis was indeed a very worthy man, therefore he would gladly give his daughter to wife. The princess was happy, young, handsome, and besides, she really liked the rich Marquis. Soon they played a wedding. So the miller's son married a princess and became a prince. All of them lived happily ever after, especially the cat, who proudly paced the palace in high boots.